Welcome everyone to Flutter Engage Extended Melbourne. Just a quick note, today or tonight we're fielding Flutter groups from not just Melbourne, but Sydney and Auckland as well. So it's nice to have a semi-regional event this time around. Okay, tonight, you can obviously watch the entire live event from Google, but one of the things, or some of the things we'll be covering tonight are the announcements and highlights. We will be celebrating Flutter 2.0, which is a big milestone for those of us who've been playing with Flutter for a really long time. We'll discuss the things we're excited about as developers ourselves and focus on some of the announcements that interest us the most. We'll also be discussing what this means for you as a Flutter developer or a person who's interested in Flutter, and we'll be trying to answer as many questions of yours as we can. So tonight I'll be presenting along with Max, Susie and Brett, and we also have Andreas, who's our MC for tonight and who will control all the fun and frivolity. And we had Lovey Jane also doing support prior to the event for socials, which has been really good. So the big chunks of presentation tonight we have announcements and highlights first up. Then we'll do a panel and audience questions, which will be interesting to see what you guys actually want to know about some of the announcements. And then we'll go through swag prizes. So just a note on swag prizes and questions. So what we'd really like is that during this event, we'd really like you to ask more questions on YouTube Live to win swag prizes. You can ask your questions on YouTube Live in the chat window, or like we tweeted before the event, you can go to Flutter Melbourne, follow us and reply to the Flutter Melbourne swag tweet with your questions. Ask as many questions as you like. Note, to win swag prizes, you really need to be in Australia or New Zealand, and we will direct message you after the event or via Twitter to actually get your delivery details if you're in fact a winner. Now, just a quick note, we haven't had quite enough questions before the event, so we really need you to ask questions during the event, which means that we'll then announce the winners of all the swag after the event, contact the winners, and we'll tweet all the results. So now going into the announcements. Okay, so this is kind of a summary of the major announcements from Flutter Engage overnight, which I should point out was just a few short hours ago. So even us as Flutter enthusiasts and organizers, we haven't had tons of time to go really deep on these things. So these are just some of the things that were announced, but we will provide resources for you as well towards the end that'll allow you to go and dive into the depths of everything that was announced and even some things that weren't announced. But the big banner stuff is really Flutter version 2 and Flutter getting web support. So looking at Flutter 2, you guys probably don't know, but the first commit was in October 2014 with a commit message of open the sky. And the first version of Flutter was in fact called Sky. Alpha was out in May 2017. I know that's when I personally discovered Flutter and got interested in it. Then Beta was almost a year later in February 2018. And then version 1 was December 2018. And it's been 2.25 years. Now we're at version 2, which is a big milestone. So just quickly on the headline announcements, and the others will go into these in a little bit more depth as we move along. But the headline announcements, the stuff that's really breaking, is that Flutter's version 2 for a start, and that web is now in stable channel. So for those of you who have been hanging off doing Flutter web for stable apps, it's there for you now. Desktop also made it to stable channel, but Brett will talk to you about how it's stable but not quite stable because there's a flag involved, and Brett will talk about that a little bit later. The other thing too is that if you want the latest desktop changes, you still should be on the beta channel or the dev channel or the master channel. But the good thing is now you can still be on stable and use the desktop platform support. Interesting enough, the Flutter crew did say that the desktop final stable release is coming later this year. So this is just my theory, but could that in fact be Flutter version 3, maybe in December, which is the normal time we have these Flutter events? Could that actually happen? But who knows? That's just conjecture on my part at this stage. So just a quick note about kind of where we're at. These are all the platforms that we've got supported by Flutter at the moment. And I don't know about you guys, but we were having a chat earlier today about how fast Flutter is actually moving. And obviously, as Flutter Melbourne organisers, we're right across Flutter and what's going on and all the releases and everything else. But even we struggle to keep up with the pace of change that's going on in Flutter. And now with effectively 7 platforms to play with, yeah, it's going to be an ongoing challenge. So if you feel bad because you haven't been able to keep up with everything going on in Flutter, don't feel bad. None of us have kind of been able to. One of the things that was announced was to do with Google's Flutterfly plugins. Now, the Flutterfly plugins for Flutter are basically plugins that use the Firebase native SDKs to actually talk to a Firebase backend. Now, there's a company that's been doing a lot of this work called Interface. Now, they've been working on it for 6 to 8 months now. So the Firebase support in Flutter has been getting better and better, especially over the last year. So most of the popular plugins now are really rock solid, very idiomatic with the underlying SDK, now have no safety support and have a lot better documentation they previously had. So when I saw in the announcement that this was kind of moving on and Firebase support was getting better, I was really interested. Another thing you should probably know, and this was not in the announcement, people may not know, but Amazon Amplify, which is equivalent to Firebase in many respects, they started a Flutter SDK quite a few months ago, but now it's actually gone general availability. So it's probably no accident that Flutter's going version 2, and at the same time, Amazon's going general availability on their Flutter SDK. So keep that in mind. You've got Firebase and you've also got Amplify now that you can use in your Flutter apps. That being said as well, I know Max is a big fan of Sentry crash reporting. Sentry now has apparently done a upgrade to the SDK. So now Sentry directly, quote unquote, supports Flutter probably a little bit better than it had before. And I was also happy to see, because I really like the iOS side of Flutter, happy to see that there's at least some movement in this release of Flutter to help improve some of the Cupertino widgets, because everyone's sort of dealing with material widgets all the time. I really like to make sure my apps, Flutter apps, perform well on iOS. So it was good to see some extra support coming for iOS as well. So on that note, I might hand over to Max for him to touch on the announcements that particularly attracted him.
Thanks, Mike. Yep, so welcome everyone. I've got lots and lots of things that I was excited about with the announcements overnight of Flutter Engage, but I've picked out a few that I especially wanted to talk about, and there's lots more that I'd love to talk about, but Brett and Susie and Mike are going to cover those. So if Mike switches over to the next slide. Cool. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is actually, it's built on a feature that if I'm able to plug the fact that I had the privilege to do a talk as part of the community talks at Engage. I talked about using isolates in Flutter, and especially a new experimental feature that's coming to Dart and Flutter isolates, which really greatly improves their performance characteristics, especially in terms of memory usage. And what's now documented on the Flutter website as an experimental feature still, got to keep emphasizing this is experimental, but it's an awesome new feature for those of you who are using especially add to app and want to have multiple Flutter engines in your app to make it easier to integrate Flutter into an existing native app on Android and iOS. And in terms of this, the performance of isolates and the Flutter engines that are built on top of them has improved drastically, like literally 99%. You can see the figures that they published there. It's essentially gone from 19 or 13 megabytes down to 180 kilobytes for every new Flutter engine that you add. So it's basically every new, say, Flutter activity in an Android app that you'd add is now just a tiny overhead compared to what it used to be. So while it's experimental, this is really exciting, and it's hopefully going to be something that we'll be able to use in stable later on. But for me, this was a really exciting thing, because it opens up a lot of possibilities of a lot more possibilities of what you can do with Flutter, especially if you're adding it to existing apps. The next thing I wanted to cover from the overnight talk, the overnight announcements, is what probably, if anyone knows me, my favorite topic is null safety, and it's finally here in stable, which I'm super excited about. So for those of you who don't know, null safety allows us to handle null values in a much better way than we've been able up to now. For those of you coming from Swift or Kotlin, you'll be quite familiar with this functionality. And the nice thing with Dart is that, like Swift, we're getting sound null safety. So it's going to be an even stronger set of guarantees than what you can get in Kotlin. So the migration is well underway. I think they've said that most of the top 100 plugins and packages on PubDev already migrated, and even a big percentage of the top 500. So the migration of the plugins is well underway. The reason that's important is because it's recommended in the documentation. So please read the document migration guide that you migrate in order. So what you want to do is make sure your package dependencies have migrated before you migrate, say, a package or your app. So if you are maintaining a package and you've got dependencies on other packages, you want to make sure they've migrated first. And for us Flutter developers, we want to make sure that most, if not all, of our dependencies have been migrated to null safety before we then migrate our app. So having said that, if you're building a new app that is going to have dependencies only on packages that have already migrated, you can pretty much go ahead and do that now. Like, the functionality is available in the stable channel. Just be aware that if you do Flutter create, it's still not enabling null safety by default for now. So you just want to do the next step of doing that initial migration. Even if you're creating a new project, you just need to do that for now. At some later point, that will be turned on by default, but it's considered not quite ready yet because the process of migrating all the package ecosystem is still underway. So yeah, super excited to back one mic. Super excited to have that. And just as another quick little thing, what's even more exciting is now that this huge new feature of null safety has been done, the Dart team is now looking at new sets of functionality, and especially what I'm excited about is static metaprogramming, because as Bob Nystrom from the Dart language team talked about during the keynote, people like me who are coming from Kotlin basically want three things from Dart: extension functions, data classes, and null safety. And two of those have been done now. We've got extension methods or functions. We've now got null safety, but data classes are missing. And what they've decided to do is, rather than just implement data classes, what they're looking at doing is actually implementing static metaprogramming, which will let end users build data classes and all kinds of other things. So that's super exciting, because that kind of functionality is really not available in many languages, and it's often been restricted to much more sort of academic languages. So having something like that is going to be really exciting. So that's just a little thing I thought I'd sneak in quickly. And then finally, on the last slide, what I wanted to talk about was kind of like me as someone who's maybe more of a niche user who is very excited about using Flutter on desktop platforms like Linux, is that FFI, the foreign function interface functionality, has also gone stable. So for those of you who might be going, what on earth is FFI? It's basically a way to let you, from your Dart code, call directly into C or C++ libraries. which what that means is you get to reuse a lot of the functionality that's available, because there's just a huge world of C and C++ libraries available, especially for desktop systems. And what this means is you can access all kinds of things that are available on those platforms, on those operating systems. So for instance, Tim Sneath has opened up on Windows basically a huge swathe, if not quite the whole Win32 API, which anyone who's worked on Windows knows that's a huge API. And he's made a lot of that, if not all of it, I'm not quite sure how much, available to you directly from Dart if you use his Win32 package. And for myself, I'm really excited about being able to use this FFI feature to access things on Linux, such as Fuse, which are user installable file systems, which are really cool to play with. And now there's a potential, like I'm working on a wrapper for Dart to let me use that from Dart. The other thing is you can access other kind of system services like audio and MIDI, which I've started playing around with recently, via FFI as well, if you call into the relevancy library. So this opens up a whole new world, if you like, for people to use native functionality, and not just via the asynchronous platform channels, which we've had all along, but this lets you call synchronously directly into the C libraries. And oh yeah, one thing I put in there was that it means on Android, you don't have to go via Java or Kotlin and the JNI to call out to native C or C++ libraries that you might want to use on Android. And so no JNI required, which is, for anyone who's dealt with it, a great relief. So I really like what I've done so far with FFI on Dart, which is only a little bit. I've just experimented, but for anyone who's interested in that, I really recommend you try it out because it's stable now too. And that's the kind of last of the language nerdy things from me. So this was just a bit of a summary, I think, of all the null safety and Dart FFI things that were announced. But with that, I think I can hand back over to the next speaker, which is Susie. And I think Susie will be telling you a whole bunch of things that she's excited about in the new Flutter 2.0 announcements. Take it away, Susie.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. I know you're excited about all the announcement on Flutter 2.0 today. So am I. I'm only interested in internationalization. So my first on-demand watch is internationalization. And I'm so excited with the tool they provided. Previously, you will have to run the command line in order to generate your translation files from ARB files. But right now, all that is done automatically for you. And it's just like the plugin in IntelliJ, and it's very convenient. If you use the plugin, you know how convenient it is. I also learned that there's a tool to generate the ABR files for multiple languages, which is similar to Localizedly, but without the team member part, and it's free. That's the best thing of all. The tool name is Amplify, and there's a GitHub link on it. You can deploy it on your local host, and off you go. Localization. Another interest of mine is monetizing the app with Flutter, and therefore the announcement of Google Mobile Ad really excites me so much, because with this package, adding the ad into the app is so much easier, simpler, and also what's best is that it supports both AdMob and Google Ad Manager. I'm very interested in the native app, which will blend into your UI design. So I'm quite disappointed because in Google AdMob package that I'm using, it does not support native ad, but in this package, it's supported, and that is just wonderful news for me. Well, if you ever have to deal with pixel overflow, you will know how hard it is to deal with it, to search for the reason why it's overflow. But thankfully, now you have these debugging tools to help you with it. With just one single click, the IDE will open the layout inspector, and you can try to find the fix for the issues using layout inspector. And with that, you can save your time on trying to find out what is wrong with your widget. Last but not least, Flutter web is now stable, which is a wonderful news for all of us. But what does it mean for us? It means that we can use the same Flutter code for mobile app to run on the web. And it is because all the work is done behind the scenes for us. Of course, there will be JavaScript dependencies we will need to take care of, but that's very least price to pay for having another additional platform. There's also two options of renderers that you can use. One is HTML, which is good for downloading size, and another one is Canvas Kit, which is good for large screen performance. And not to forget, since the web UI can be either large screen on the desktop or small screen on a mobile phone, the use of Layout Builder will be very convenient to build your widget adaptively to any screen size. So remember to use it. It's really good. And that looks like my to-do list is getting very long. It includes Flutter Desktop, Flutter Web, international localization, now safety, advertisement. That's too much. That's all from me today. Thank you for listening. Over to you, Brett.
It would help if I unmute myself. So, apologies for making life difficult for everyone by announcing a whole bunch of stuff. I really just want to focus in on an area of interest to me, and that's desktop. So, as was announced, macOS, Windows, and Linux is now available in the stable channel. So you don't need to do what you usually had to do, which was, I'm developing on stable. I want to go try something out. I'll switch to beta, then I'll switch to dev, and throw everything away. But there's a little bit here that just highlighting the under early release flag. Next slide. So what does this magical flag look like? For anyone who's been playing with web, this should look reasonably familiar. It's effectively enabled web, but for all the other platforms. And so once you've run this command, I suggest realistically run all three. Then as soon as you run Flutter create, you'll get the additional directories for the Flutter runner for Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. And suddenly your application can build and deploy on those platforms. Why is this interesting? Next slide. There's a fun thing. Oh, actually, I forgot. I had this slide. Yes, Matt's covered a bunch of this, but FFI is actually kind of interesting, especially for desktop, because of Tim Sneath's Win32 package. And it's worth calling out that currently the Win32 package is effectively hand-rolled from a Excel file, but we're in the process of actually setting it up to come across from Microsoft supplied, let's just click Windows here, Windows metadata, which is something the Windows team is building out for Rust support. So at some point in the not terribly distant future, well, when Tim Sneath can find time when he's not presenting to the world, we will actually get a fairly complete coverage of the entire Win32 surface, which is just slightly mind-bending. Next slide. So getting back to why is desktop interesting? I know a lot of you are probably focused mainly on iOS and Android and possibly web. And you're probably looking at Windows, Mac OS, and Linux and going, we're not going to ship an application on Windows or Mac OS. iOS and Android and web is like where everyone is. There is actually a really useful way to use Windows or Mac OS, depending on what platform you develop on. And that's actually to use it as a really fast mobile replacement, because it means that you can sit there and do development and change what things look like on the screen without actually having to start an emulator or simulator. So it's actually very useful, which is one of the reasons why we put it in the stable branch. So you can run those commands, generate the runner files, and then sit there and do development in a much quicker way. The other reason we put it in stable was to try and get you all to raise bugs against me and tell me where it's not working and what's broken, so we can march towards bringing it to stable. We effectively need you all to tell me what I've missed in testing all this stuff. Next slide. The thing that actually stood out for me, and it's sort of been on the quiet for a while now, is Ubuntu is actually throwing a lot of effort into making Flutter for desktop work. They're actually taking the lead on doing things like multiple window support, which is obviously not something that's all that interesting to a mobile phone, which has exactly one display port, being the phone. But it is actually quite useful for like a desktop application where you have multiple windows, multiple screens, and all sorts of other things like that. So it will be quite interesting to see how Ubuntu moves this forward, especially with the fact that they're bringing across their native theming and all that sort of thing. And just checking, I think I don't have another slide. Oh, I do. Oh, yeah. The other thing I spend my time on, this is not strictly desktop, but I do actually spend a whole lot of time on Dartpad, and it's kind of fun to see it called out in the keynote. If you see bugs in this and or you want features, please feel free to hassle me, and I'll get it added to the queue. And that's about it. So I think we bring everyone back now.
Okay, thanks, Max. Thanks, Thuzies. Thanks, Brett. Now that was a super quick run through of all the announcements that occurred today. In fact, just a very, very sneak peek. We will provide results at the end, and I'm sure a lot of you have already looked at some of the announcements and gone deeper on certain things that interest you. But one of the things we wanted to try for this event was knowing that you guys can just go and watch the whole keynote and the announcements and all the resources and videos and articles provided by the Flutter team, was to have a bit more of a panel question discussion and ask Brett the really hard questions. So on that note, just a quick note before we jump into that is please keep asking questions, because we need lots and lots and lots of questions so we can actually award the prizes at the end. And one thing I did forget, we will get to a feedback form at the end of the presentation. That's another way you can be eligible for swag prizes after the event, is to fill in the feedback form. It's always a bit tough to get people to do that. Okay, and so now I might ask Andreas to pop us all up on screen.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Mike. We do have like a bunch of questions, but probably not enough to last us the entire next hour. So yeah, please keep sending them in. I'll be switching between the live stream and the YouTube comments and everything, trying to get the questions into this stream. But here we go. Let's start with a Twitter audience question. How was Dash introduced, and why did the Flutter framework get that name? Anyone want to jump in?
Does anyone know?
I think Brett's
maybe I'll put my hand up, because just by sheer coincidence, I Googled this up earlier today, and I actually posted it in our Slack. Oh, this is a promo for anyone who's not part of the ANZ GDG Slack. Pop over to the GDG Melbourne website and sign up to our Slack. But I did put a link in there. There's actually, I think, flutter.dev/dash might be the link, or if you just Google about Dash, Flutter about Dash, you'll find it. So I stumbled across this page. I swear it didn't used to be there. So I think Brett might know how recently it got added. But on there is the whole history of Dash. So how he came about, the fabulous Dart, I think it is, team member who created him quite a few years ago now. Like even the process of having the Dash plushies made up and all the various variations of Dash. So at least on the Dash side, I can answer this question by recommending you pop over to that page, which answers it way better than I ever could. So yeah, if you want to know all about Dash, flutter.dev/dash, I think is the place to go.
I think I can answer the second part of that question too, is why the Flutter framework got the name Flutter. Because I seem to remember I asked Eric Seidel at a Google I/O event that we went to, that me and Max went to secretly, and I believe the answer is that Google had a bunch of startups or companies that were started with registered trademark names, and the Flutter team just picked one off the shelf, and it happened to be Flutter.
Yeah.
Brett, can you confirm that?
Turns out that the legality of registering a product name around the entire world is actually quite hard. So when you acquire a company, you acquire all of its IP, you can then just stick it on the shelf, and then later on, when you need some more IP to, a globally registered name, you can just turn around and use it without having to engage lots of lawyers and all that sort of thing. So that's the short of it.
Cool.
That's the very legal answer. I think we can kick over to a YouTube question from Aidan Davis. What's the harm in enabling null safety before your dependencies have migrated?
Max, I know you want to answer this.
Totally a Max question.
I did not want to hog all the not safety questions, but yeah. In fact, I think Brett gave a talk about this at our last event, so I'm sure he's a better person to answer this. But the main reason is there's nothing bad's going to happen. Really, the reason why that's a recommendation is because it's quite possible and even likely that when packages migrate to null safety, their APIs will change or could change. And it's quite likely that they will because of other things that people will change or refactor as part of moving to null safety. So it's more of the fact that if you move to null safety before, say, one of your dependencies does, then you could be in for like more work later on when they then move to null safety and you have to accommodate the change in that package's API. So that's basically as far as I understand, the reasoning behind the recommendation that the migration happened kind of like bottom up. So all the kind of packages with no dependencies go first, then the packages that depend on them go, then the apps that depend on those packages go. So it's just to minimize the amount of churn that has to happen in your code when you migrate to null safety, because if all your dependencies have already migrated, then you won't have to redo anything in the future if you've done it before they had. So that's, as far as I understand it, the reason.
So yes, there's two parts. Part one is yes, absolutely. It's much easier once all your dependencies are migrated. The second is migrating to null safety when you've got a dependency that's not null safe doesn't get you sound null safety. You're still running mixed mode.
So I shouldn't feel guilty that I've been ignoring null safety?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I've been waiting for my dependencies to change, basically.
Yep.
Good excuse.
I'll take that as a yes.
Cool. We might stick with the a bit of a tangent on the null safety for now. We've got some Twitter questions. What are the best practices for adding non-null by default to REST API model fields? Make every field maybe null or mark the specific null fields from the backend DB in the Dart classes. If a non-null int field is not present in JSON, will it error or be set to 0?
Oh, I think I recognize the person who's asking this question. And like, I think I know, well, at least from my background, perhaps shared with this person as Android dev, like I've run into this issue using Kotlin JSON serialization libraries and dealing with things that shouldn't be null or might be null in JSON. And then you may have marked them as like something that could be null in JSON, but you might then go ahead and mark it as not null in your code, and that can cause runtime errors. I don't actually have any good, I don't know if Brett does. I don't actually, because like I've only just started using null safety myself in like an actual production app. I don't really have any experience in dealing with JSON serialization or REST APIs in the context of null safety. I don't know if you do, Brett, so I can't really offer anything specific.
So I've got two separate points here. One, what is going to happen is specific to the JSON library in question. So the simple answer is it's not defined by the language because all of our JSON libraries are libraries. So whether it's freezed or whichever one you use, I'm not sure what the answers they are going to use are. I'm assuming throw an exception is the most sane thing to do, because that's effectively what happens if you put a null into something that's not null. But the more interesting question here, and this is sort of a learning from the protobuf community, is that you don't want to say that this field is always not null. Because sooner or later, some nitwit is going to put a null in it, or they're not going to fill it in, or something. And you really want to be writing business code that goes, okay, if this field is null, what do I do? Do I show an error to the user? Do I drop the record? Do I pretend like it's just 0? And those questions are business rule specific. So you need to be specific about them and not rely on, what your JSON library does this week.
Actually, I might jump in here because I've had some experience using API calls to things like FanArt TV to do like a movie and TV application. And FanArt TV, unfortunately, data is provided by a web interface to the public. And so that's an API where I have this problem. I don't know the answer, but I have this problem definitely. Like, it's not consistent because, consumers are providing the data through a web portal straight into the back end, and that API is serving it up to me. So any field can be null, never, except for that one time, Brett, which you're talking about. It'll be null 99. It'll be have data in it 99% of the time. Then that one time it'll be null. So this is I think we might end up taking this question offline because I think it's a tricky one.
That's cool. Fair enough. I'll jump over to another YouTube question. Will there be support for new chip Macs? I assume that's the M1s and future chips.
We're working on it. As I think it was Eric Seidel in the stream this morning said, we found out about M1 when you all found out about M1, and we ordered our M1 Max when you all ordered your M1 Max. And realistically for us, it's equivalent work to bringing up a new platform because we have to, it's effectively a new host. We're used to compiling ARM for, the phones, but suddenly all of our tooling has to be compiled for ARM as well. So it's an interesting bootstrap exercise that the team is working on. So yes, it's coming.
So Brett, if I wanted to buy an M1 Mac and I'm a Flutter dev, am I buying it this year or next year?
My understanding is that the tooling actually works under Rosetta 2.
Yeah. I believe there is there's a highly active Flutter issue around this very issue for people who have already bought Apple Macs, and I have had a quick glimpse at it to figure out whether I should or shouldn't. So I'll probably refer to that. Susie, do you have who out of the team here on the panel actually has Macs and is therefore likely to buy another Mac? It's me.
Yeah.
Huh?
I got a few.
You got a few. Okay, cool.
Cool. Well, since we're talking about computers, maybe we'll jump over to desktop support. Desktop support is beta, yes, but it is available in the stable channel. Is stable the channel to be on for the latest desktop support?
So what's happening here is what's on the stable channel is a snapshot of beta as of yesterday. And it will basically stay there until the next stable release, at which point the beta snapshot will be updated to where it is at that release point. So the whole point of stable is that it is stable, so we're not going to keep shipping changes to it. So it's effectively going to slowly fall behind. So if being on the latest, seeing the latest and greatest desktop stuff is important to you, Dev Channel is a great place to be, but you probably don't want to ship anything to customers from Dev Channel. Beta Channel is probably a good balance between the two. But if you're just going, I want to run something and use it like an emulator or something, the beta bits that are part of the stable release are probably good enough.
Cool. That's good to know. Let's... what do we got? How about some a bit more localization stuff, maybe?
Susie.
How good is internationalization, localization in Flutter?
It's very good. It's really, really very good. Imagine yourself can speak 4 languages at the same time. That is how internationalization in Flutter works. And you know, if you use the plugin, don't use the one with the command line generation. Use the plugin, and with the new internationalization support, life will be much easier. So if you really need it, use it. If you don't need it, use it anyway.
I can't agree more. I used to work
Yeah.
in mobile games, and internationalization, localization, just giving someone a spreadsheet or a file where they have all the strings in the app and they just translate them all with context. It's the best way to be. Let's jump over to some multi-platform stuff. So with Kotlin and Flutter, both now offering multi-platform capabilities, are there any particular advantages to using one over the other? And assuming an equal level of developer knowledge in each language, does Flutter offer more platforms or more libraries or more Dash plushies? There's some few maybe troll questions in there, but if anyone wants
Definitely
to go.
more Dash plushies. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely
more
where
More plushies. There are no Kotlin plushies.
I think I discussed this before with someone in GDG. The reason that Kotlin multi-platform and the Flutter is put side by side to be comparison is because of the word multi-platform. But actually, the Kotlin does not do any UI work on the multi-platform, whereas the Flutter can do both UI and also some of the logic, a lot of the logic and work business logic. So by comparison, I choose two features over one features. And that is how Flutter is better, plus the Dash plushie.
I have to say I have no knowledge of where Kotlin's at. I'm curious which platforms it supports. Like saying it's cross-platform is one thing, but as we pointed out, Flutter is now on 6 platforms, and that's a few more platforms than most.
As far as I know, Kotlin multi-platform support Android and iOS.
It's
anything
targeting
I'll try
Windows and web as well, but I don't know where it's at yet.
The only thing I'll chime in to
Good
say is that
enough.
also sometimes people like mix and match Kotlin multi-platform and Jetpack Compose. So they're kind of like related, but they're not the same thing. So like Jetpack Compose might support some things and Kotlin, but that's not all the things that Kotlin multi-platform supports and vice versa. So
Doesn't Jetpack Compose only support Android, Max? Or am I wrong?
no.
Yep.
JetBrains have released, I think it's a beta 3 or beta 4 for desktop, which runs anywhere where like the Java SDK runs. So there is now desktop support, beta desktop support for Jetpack Compose, but that's about all I know.
All right. Well, more Dash plushies is mostly what I got out of that.
We'll talk about Swag a little bit later.
Yep. Another Twitter question: can we create a component library using Flutter and then use it in native iOS and Android apps?
So I'm guessing the correct answer here is you'd need to use add to app. And then you've got to embed Flutter in your native app to use those widgets or components, sorry.
That sounds tricky. Cool. What else have we got?
So while Andreas is picking that, does that mean that it may be tricky, but none of us have actually done it yet in a commercial app? Is that pretty much it?
Isn't Max the add to app specialist?
Oh, that's what I was fishing for, yeah.
I wouldn't say specialist, but like I'd say the more common scenario is the other way around, is that you would use native views. It is possible, for 100% possible, to use native views inside your Flutter app. Or, so like, for instance, Maps or the web view, you can embed that. There are plugins to embed that inside your Flutter UI. But going the other way around, you at the kind of like the smallest unit that you can embed into a native app at the moment is basically, for instance, on Android, for people who know Android, and that's what I know, is a whole activity. You can't, say, take a Flutter button or a widget and put it into your app. You have to basically take a whole activity which brings a whole Flutter engine in. And so that's why in the add to app scenario, I was quite excited with that new experimental support, because that makes it much easier to add a whole lot of Flutter to your existing Android app. Whereas right up until that point, it's been actually quite difficult to do more than add one, say, Flutter activity to an Android app. Like, there was quite a lot of cost and jumping through hoops to do more than that. So yeah, that's the more common scenario is.
Cool.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Got another one from YouTube. What's an easy way to have multiple versions of Flutter and use them for different projects?
So I'm guessing the question. Oh, go ahead, Max.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to talk twice in a row, but what I use is a tool called FVM, and I found it's quite handy. So
I looked at FVM and I was going to use it, and it looks really good. But in the end, I just fixed the Flutter version, the pub spec, to the version I wanted. Like, regardless of channel, that wasn't an issue for me. I just had to pick a specific version of Flutter. That's worked for me, but I'm not sure if that's a good approach.
So just to walk it back and sort of explain what I suspect the problem is that if you are running multiple different versions of Flutter in different projects, you wind up having to, oh, sorry, I've got a dog currently chewing on my cables. You wind up having to download the entirety of the Flutter tools for each different version.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming FVM is a way of effectively stashing all of those tools in different directories and then switching environment variables between them.
Yeah. It's basically like an automation for, like, if you manually downloaded multiple versions of the Flutter SDK from different channels and put them basically in separate directories, and then you changed your path to point to those different directories whenever you needed, like, beta or stable or dev. So FVM is just basically essentially like a helper script that changes things around, points to different installs of the Flutter SDK for you, but you still end up with multiple SDKs installed on so make sure you've got plenty of disk space.
Given that I change SDKs multiple times a day, that would save me a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah, it sounds like a very similar tool to NVM or RVM or any of those version managers for your platform. Yeah. So if you work on any other technologies, that's a bit of a lifesaver. How about some Flutter Web? I'm not sure how related to announcements this is, but it's maybe a good question anyway. Does the developer have to choose between web rendering engines, or is there a default that works in most cases?
Susie, did you want to answer this?
Yeah. This part is something in the keynote that I forgot to mention, is that the default value for the rendering engine is auto, so it will switch automatically or based on the desktop or the mobile device. But if you want to specify the rendering engine for yourself, you can do that. But most of the cases, the default will work fine. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
I can add a bit of color if you are interested. There's some difference in capabilities between the two engines. So depending on whether you want some of the advanced rendering techniques of the Canvas WebAssembly skier engine, which point you can effectively force using that no matter where you are. But the downside of that is your mobile phone users have to download the skier WebAssembly engine. On the flip side, if you want to use, say, images from everywhere, even if they're not behind a cause supplying engine, cause supplying web server, you have to use the HTML rendering engine. So there's some interesting little gotchas in there. So please test with both and make sure it works.
Nice. I need to copy some more questions into the banners, but we've got one about navigation.
Oh, perfect.
Yep. So,
Andreas, we get stuck. I've got one particular question I want to ask Brett that we don't have written down, and he knows All right, go for it.
I'm
Andre.
sorry, I have to go. Bye.
Maybe we got time at the end.
Yeah.
So, YouTube question. In my humble or honest, who knows, opinion, the gaping hole in the release is navigation. Do we have any insight as to when this will be addressed? Anyone go?
I just did, because I'm sure Brett can add more background, but we've had navigation for a while, but we just got Navigator 2 even before today. We got it a few months ago, and it's been in, there's been a design doc kicking around about Navigator 2, and I think it's been in beta for a while. I personally, though, have not yet played with Navigator 2. I hear it's significantly more complex, but it adds all the functionality that anyone could ever need. But Brett, thoughts?
I'm talking from half forgotten knowledge, but I believe Navigator 2 has been renamed Router, because one of the problems with calling something Navigator 2, it makes everyone who's using Navigator 1 think they have to upgrade, when it's actually answering a slightly different problem, which is complex navigation systems. So for simple navigation systems, the current Navigator is more than competent. So in those cases, please stay with it. But for people who need more complex routing, then the package currently or previously known as Navigator 2 is worth investigating. And if that's not sufficient, then raising bugs and telling us what we're doing wrong is the way to go.
Yep, that's always a good feedback loop. Actually get feedback from the community and be vocally in the community, put stars on the issues and stuff, get those votes in, get the stuff that you want in the system.
And comment on the design docs, please.
Absolutely. Cool. I got a few extras. There's plenty of questions coming. I just it's multitasking. So how about some different Flutter Web stuff? Can you discuss Flutter Web performance optimization, progressive web apps specifically, maybe?
Oh, this is a tough one. I don't have any knowledge in this area, so I don't know yet.
So sorry, we'll skip that. And if you can go. No, that's all right. Some bit more platform-specific questions. Are there any announced plans for CloudKit integration? If not, would it be achievable using platform channels?
I'm curious if there's anything special about CloudKit. If it's just an Objective-C API, then it should be doable from platform channels. I'm kind of surprised that someone hasn't done that already. Where's my pub.dev? Why do I not have it already open? Oh yeah, no packages. Oh well. So yes, it should be doable from platform channels.
That sounds right. More platformy stuff. Bluetooth. When or if will a BLE plugin be available to run on all platforms? I don't know much about this, but currently this seems complex.
Maybe I could grab that one because I've actually done a little bit of BLE here and there. Not a whole lot in Flutter, but I actually did play around with it recently because I had a new Flutter, BLE gadget that I wanted to try out Flutter. So the thing is, there's actually a choice of several different packages available currently on Android for like the mobile platforms for Android and iOS. I believe one of them is also getting support, like where there's not great support is once you start getting to the desktops. So I think one of them is adding Mac OS support or has added Mac OS support. I'm not on a Mac, so I didn't pay too much attention to that, but definitely none of them have Linux support because the underlying Bluetooth package for accessing Bluetooth from a developer from Canonical only just got BLE support. I think it was 6 or 7 days ago because I actually asked for it and I was subscribed on the bug. So that's like really fresh. Like it has it now, but it's like freshly made, and it's not integrated with any of the existing BLE plugins that work on Android and iOS. So support on desktop is patchy. Support on the mobile platforms is really good. Support on the web, I don't know of anything. Like currently only Chrome implements web BLE, and I don't think any of the plugins have that support. The answer is great support on iOS and Android, slowly getting there on desktop, and probably a ways off on web.
I can probably jump in there as well. The company I work for has a commercial app that talks to Bluetooth beacons, and I believe it uses Bluetooth BLE, and I've just looked up. So we use the Flutter Blue package, and it apparently supports Android, iOS, and Mac OS now. So perhaps have a bit of a look at that. But I know we've been using it in a commercial app for a good 18 months, so can't be that bad.
I think initially we had to make some contributions back to that, but that was a while ago. More philosophical question. Max mentioned that sound null safety and highlighted the soundness as being important. What's the difference between unsound and sound null safety?
I'm happy not to take this unless. All right, I can do it. I can do it. Since I'm the one who's making a big deal about it and rubbing it into all the Kotlin people. Like the thing is in Kotlin, and this is not like a slight against Kotlin. It's just a design decision that the Kotlin language designers made when they created Kotlin, and for them, Java interoperability was very important, and Java is not null safe. So what they could have chosen to do was when they interoperate with Java, they could have said everything that can potentially come out of Java land into Kotlin land is potentially null. Anything in Java can be null because it has no concept of null safety. So they could have said, okay, anything coming out of there is possibly null. So you have to deal with that as a nullable type in Kotlin, which would have, to my mind, made all of Kotlin developers' lives miserable. So they chose not to do that. They chose to say, no, you can choose to deal with it how you like as a Kotlin developer, but basically it's going to come out as like that it's not nullable. So what happens is you can you just basically make the assumption that something that comes out of a Java API in Kotlin is not null, and then at runtime, it turns out it is null, and it blows up because like Kotlin assumed coming out of Java it was not null. Like hopefully I'm explaining this reasonably well. Like I think there are other Android developers here who can chime in, but in Dart, the plan is that that's not going to be the case. Like once you say something, well, the thing is Dart only needs to, the only thing it interoperates with itself is its pre-null safety self. And so the approach in Dart is that when you say something is not nullable, you're pretty much guaranteed that it's not nullable. At runtime, it's not going to happen that unless you specifically override that guarantee, it's always going to be not null. That's where the soundness comes in, is that you don't have the prospect of a nullable value sneaking in, if you like, into a non-nullable type. If your whole app, and this is what Brett emphasized before about migration, if your whole app is null safely sound, and it has to, the only way it gets like that is if all your dependencies are null safe as well. If one of your dependencies has not yet opted into null safety, then you're basically in the same boat that Kotlin people are with Java calling out to Java code, is that there could potentially be nulls coming along from code that has no concept of null safety. So that's why soundness is important, is because once you do like have, say, an app that's completely migrated to null safety, then I think this was in the presentation by Bob Nystrom, is that then the wonderful VM and compiler engineers can do all these awesome optimizations as well, that at runtime, there's much less like actual native binary code that needs to be generated by the compiler to actually deal with having to check for nulls and not nulls, because now it knows at compile time that something can't be null. So there's no need for it to insert null checks that happen at runtime. Hopefully I'll explain that. Like, I think Brett and the others are nodding. So, but please feel free to
summarize, to take Max's rant and turn it into a soundbite. When we went from Dart 1 to Dart 2, we went from a world where we had no idea what the object was. So we had to insert object type checks everywhere. And the conversion between Dart 2 unsound and Dart 2 sound is we likewise get to lose the null checks, which means you go from hundreds of underlying machine code instructions down to 2 or 3 when you're looking up a field, because we can guarantee at compile time that the thing you're looking at is like an integer or it is an object foo, and it is not null.
Thanks, Brett. That's
short version. Very abridged. Still got some questions coming through, which is awesome. Let's go with maybe another Max special. Depends how much you want to get into it, but anyone can answer this, I think. Can you go into more detail on what metaprogramming means?
I feel the need to
it's not a Flutter specific thing. Yeah, sure.
Go, Brett.
So just to give Max a chance to go and get a drink. So metaprogramming is a fun thing. It's for those of us who've done Lisp or Smalltalk or those sorts of languages. Metaprogramming is one of those things that we love to bang on about. For people who've come from C-derived languages where you think that metaprogramming is evil, or especially C++, metaprogramming is really just being able to write a program that runs at compile time. So there are a variety of languages that are exploring the capability for a programmer to be able to go, I want to write code that writes code. And we've gone down the path of actually creating a set of packages around Builder to allow people to, write annotation processes and things like that to then turn around and build out more code. So that's my summary. What have I missed, Max?
No, I think that's much better than I would have said it. Like, I think that's the key thing. Like, I'm one of those people who came from an engineering, C, and assembly background. So all this computer sciencey stuff is quite not foreign to me, but I learned it late in life, shall we say. So I think that's a really good way of saying it, that like it's programs that run in compile time. So
just to add to that too, I know that the Dart team released a post today about Dart 2.12, and at the end of that, they talked about the Dart language features that they're looking at going forward with. And I know the exact approach to metaprogramming is a little bit up in the air, and they're still kind of working on that. But suggest you go and look at that Dart 2.12 Medium post and have a look at the things they're working on. And I think they even touch on a little bit about the metaprogramming and what the approach may be. But it's coming, and I think we can trust the development team to take an approach that is good.
Oh, and so that's what I forgot to say. If you have feedback, if you're one of those people who feel strongly about how it should be done, this is the perfect time to give feedback on. There's I can't remember the number, but in the Dart language, it's GitHub issues. There's an issue for this very topic. Please go there, and that's where it's being discussed, and give your feedback, because I noticed with some things to do with null safety, there was a bit of a fuss that happened like a month or two ago, where people had some strong feedback for the Dart team about a particular bit of the null safety implementation. And like, to be honest, my opinion is it's way too late for that. Like, it was already shipping in beta. Like, if you've got strong opinions on how something should be, give people feedback like at the very start of the process, right now when it's being designed. That's the perfect time. Like, for those of you developers yourselves, like, you don't want to be told like when you're about to ship your app to change something because someone's changed their mind. You want to be told right at the start. That's the best time to find out how people want something implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. Need to give people lead time for that. I think the other side of metaprogramming is dynamic runtime metaprogramming. So like in Python, you can make programs that affect other classes at runtime and reflection in Java and all the other kind of things. I don't know if Flutter has any plans for that.
We actually stripped it out. We had mirrors, the mirrors API, which was the runtime stuff, which was fine for desktop, but it turns out trying to do that for mobile and not burn your battery doesn't work. So Flutter effectively turned mirrors off, and it's, as a result, kind of an unused corner of the language.
Yep, that sounds familiar. There's a bunch more questions now. That's good. Do you want a high level one or a low level programming one?
One of each,
Maybe we'll go high level.
Choose an easy one.
Where are we seeing Flutter in the next 5 to 10 years in the global market?
Number one.
Brett loves these questions because he's bound by NDAs and stuff. He loves them. So,
no comment.
Smiling and his mouth's not moving. Look, I'll put my 2 cents worth in here with my product management old person hat on. It's 5 to 10 years. Given how fast Flutter's come up to version 2, like it's been quite a few years, and we saw at the beginning, first commit in 2014. It seems fast, but it actually hasn't been. Where is Flutter in 5 to 10 years? Could I suggest that it could be, potentially, it could be dead, or it could be the leader in reactive declarative programming. I mean, your guess is probably as good as ours, and I know Brett can't guess. So, anyone else have any thoughts?
Arguably, I have guessed. I've put my career on the line on it. Simple.
I'm on the optimistic side that within the 5 to 10 years, there will be a Flutter phone, and then there will be Flutter Studio, and people will only talk about Flutter only.
And on that note, we have to probably throw in the fuchsia into that conversation. So, okay, come on. Well, let's get serious for this. So, fuchsia is you can see it mentioned in the repo and the issues. It's down as a platform in the Flutter repo, so it is public knowledge. Whether fuchsia is actually just Google's experiment on what a more modern kind of Linux kernel should be, or whether it's actually going to turn into a retail product, no one knows. But who knows? Maybe fuchsia turns into the next Android, and we do know, I think, Max, don't we, that Flutter is kind of intended to be the UI layer for fuchsia?
Yes, although from what I've seen, actually, they're being very kind of like open about what they'll run. So, but Flutter was the first, I guess, UI that they used. So. But yeah, a lot of it's kind of like experimental. It seems like, I haven't followed it closely, but big chunks of it seem to change at frequent intervals. So, like, I wouldn't stake my name on betting anything about fuchsia at all. Like, it's just so unpredictable.
Yeah, sorry about your career, Brett. That's
Oh no, fuchsia. Flutter is awesome. Flutter's going to rule in 5 years. We're all on top.
Well, obviously we're biased, but we all enjoy coding in Flutter, and I know a lot of devs that do. So, but I guess to sum it up, where's JavaScript going to be in 5 to 10 years? It's a really, really hard question, especially in IT. But so, based on what we've said, we obviously don't have a crystal ball, but I guess all you can do is focus on what you can do now with Flutter and what the roadmap looks like the next year or two out, and kind of run with that.
Well, yeah, a lot of wild speculation.
Yep, totally.
The thing that I'd say here about where Flutter is going next, it depends on you guys. Like, we build our roadmap based on what the development community go, we really want this thing and we want to use it for this use case and we're building these things with it. That's what really drives us. So you guys have got as much in stake in this as we do.
Get all your feedback in. The future could be fuchsia.
Yeah. and no pressure or anything, but yeah.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Got time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions, depending how in depth they go. Let's go with some state management. Any word from major state management framework authors on implementing null safety?
Well, I know Remy's planning on shipping something now-ish, because I'm subscribed to the bug and he said he's building it. As to the other ones, I don't know.
Yeah, I can speak for Remy's newer effort of Riverpod. I'm working on a new project that's null safe from the beginning, and like Remy's Riverpod is working beautifully with null safety. So Riverpod at least is good to go, but I don't know about Provider.
Next day or two.
Yeah, Provider version 5 is on a preview release on pub.dev. I just checked. So Provider 5 is your null safety version.
Nice, very good. Let's go to the other kind of state. Is there any way to provide localization based on state rather than country?
Actually, I'm not aware of the people in Melbourne use different words rather than the people in Sydney, but I know that in Chinese that so many dialects that in the local we can actually. I know it's possible, but I'm not sure if Flutter Internationalization actually support different English subcode like that. I'm very sorry. English is not my mother tongue.
That's okay, Susie. I'm sure you could hack it, but you'd have to give Flutter a whole bunch of hints. So you're going to have to start figuring out your location and then feed that into some sort of distance to locations to figure out which state you're in and all sorts of fun things like that.
Or give people a really granular locale picker or something.
So it's different from Chinese.
Well, it depends how much effort you want to put into overriding the defaults, right? That's cool.
Good luck with that.
Okay, a bit deeper into the code again. Brett mentioned Flutter embedded. I don't see any official docs on this. What kinds of platforms? Raspberry Pi, Linux, or something else, maybe?
Yeah. There is actually a Medium post floating around by, I think it was Mehmet, on running up Raspberry Pi on Linux. Running Flutter up on Raspberry Pi. I have yet to succeed. I've got a couple of Raspberry Pis floating around on my desk that were meant to be Flutter targets, but that never happened. The types of embedded platforms that we're actually talking about these days is slightly different. The one in the keynote was a Toyota. So, yeah. What do you mean by embedded is an interesting question. Everything from fridges to cars, apparently.
I do know about Raspberry Pis because I tried it myself. Like, based on that article, I think there is I found like there's a project on a GitHub repo that does say that it runs on Raspberry Pi bare metal. Like, of course, Flutter, like on Linux, like if you just run Linux on a Raspberry Pi, then you can just use the Linux desktop support. But these are kind of like, this is sort of like more bare metal without like a normal Linux distro. So I can't remember the name of it, but if you Google for it, there is a GitHub repo, which I think is like something like Flutter RPi or something like that, where it promises to do it. But yeah, I haven't got it actually working myself, but the person who did it in the README says it works.
I think we broke it when we went 64-bit only.
Oh, could be.
So, don't know.
And 32-bit will all be over in 2031 anyway, right?
Just to extend that a little bit more, Brett, this is sort of like a sub-question on this person's question. So Flutter embedded, I've got a Google Nest Hub Max and a Google Nest Hub, and I hear that they run Flutter code, but I don't believe it's available to us devs to somehow use our Nest Hub Max as a deployment target.
That's correct.
Okay. Full stop. Okay. Cool, yeah. Yet.
All right. Last question. Super soft one for you all, just to wind up the community questions. If I'm releasing an application done with Flutter, is there a place I could share it with the community? There is already one
GitHub.
answer in YouTube, but everyone else, yep.
Okay, I'll jump on this one because I've done a lot of CI/CD. So obviously, Google Play and the Apple App Store you can share with the community, but you've also got Test Flight on iOS, and you've also got Firebase app distribution in Firebase as well to share with the community.
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that.
Yeah, thanks. Josh. See? He wants to run Flutter. So yeah, you can use one of those things. I've used Firebase app distribution a fair bit for both iOS and Android apps, and that was a pretty good option if you, for some reason, can't put your app into Test Flight, where the app only lasts 90 days before you have to redeploy it, or Google Play.
And I guess if you want to share with the community, there's Slack channels and stuff to promote on, GitHub for just general community sharing your code.
I assume that he already uploaded his app to App Store, Play Store, and he just want to find a place to share the link. So I suggest the Showcase channel, CDG Slack, our Flutter, any channel will do. But if you go to Flutter channel, you will get more response on it. And last time, Mark, you told me about the widget website for the Flutter community app. I tried to find that link, but I can't find that link anymore. And LinkedIn, edit on LinkedIn. That will be the place for people to find you as well.
Cool. Yeah, just get engaged with the community if you want to promote it. It's the best way to be. If you want to contribute to Flutter, get engaged with the community, give everyone your feedback. Awesome. That's it for questions. Thanks so much, everyone. Time to jump back over, and then I'll kick everyone out.
Okay, everyone, let's just quickly talk about, before we round up, swag prizes. So these are the swag prizes we're giving away. Arguably, one of these things, a Dash plushie, is probably the most desirable bit of swag in any Flutter developer's mind. We're lucky enough to be able to give away 3, and we've also got 9 Flutter Engage mugs. We've also got 9 combos of a tote bag and a Flutter flask. The only problem we've got, though, is that we didn't have enough questions to appoint the winners before the event. So now that we've got lots and lots and lots of questions in the panel and chat session that we've just had, what we'll do is we'll pick the best questions, allocate the swag to those best questions, and contact those winners directly, and publish a tweet as well, just highlighting who exactly won what. So stay tuned on that one. We're going to have to do some voting and stuff offline after this event to figure out who won what. So the last bit is now what? Now that you've listened to us, and hopefully we'll go off and look at some more of the Google material, Medium posts, watch it on YouTube, the whole kit and caboodle. Now what should you do? Actually, before we get to that, we're going to touch on one thing. We have a 4th plushie. So we managed to get a 4th plushie, and what we'd like to do from here on in is occasionally, and I emphasize occasionally, when we have a little bit of extra swag, we want to actually provide what we're calling community contributor awards. So this sort of award is where we as the organizers award a special bit of swag, in this case, the 4th precious Dash plushie, to someone who participates and contributes to the Flutter community in Australia and New Zealand. So the first winner of the first Community Contributor Award, which is a Dash plushie, is Lewis. So congratulations, Lewis. That'll get sent out to you shortly. But the other resources I was just talking about, take a screenshot of this, take a photo of this. The What's New in Flutter post on Medium is quite long. It's a 19-minute read, but it's quite good, by Chris Sells. He goes through everything that's new out of the announcements today. There's also an article there specifically on Flutter Web support. So have a look at that if you're interested in Flutter Web, because that goes into a lot more detail around Flutter Web than we perhaps have done here. Of course, go to the Flutter Engage website. You can get the keynote video and a whole bunch of other things. I have seen the videos are all up on YouTube generally. One thing that I did watch early this morning at about 5 a.m., there is a Q&A video. Now, keep an eye out for that. I haven't seen it posted as yet, but it's Hixie, it's Eric Seidel, it's a whole bunch of key people in the Flutter team actually talking about Flutter. It's a really good session, similar to the Q&A session we've kind of just done, but they answer some of the hard questions about Flutter. So, for example, if you're into Flutter Web, you'll know that SEO is a little bit of a problem at the moment. They directly answer that question. There's also been issues with app startup on iOS causing some jank, which has been a little bit controversial in the community. So go and find that QA video. I'll probably tweet the link once I come across it, but I haven't seen it yet. Watch the Q&A video. It's gold. And of course, Max has got a community presentation as well, community video called Featherweight Isolates in Flutter. So go find out that video on events.flutter.dev as well. And on the Dart side, go to medium.com, Dartlang, and have a look at that announcing Dart 2.2 post, which is, again, goes into the ins and outs of Dart and perhaps where the Dart team's taking Dart next. And of course, the null safety migration guide, you've got to go check that out as well. And now that null safety or sound null safety is out and about, you should look at the migration guide and upgrade your app to full null safety after, of course, you've waited on your dependencies to also be null safe versions. There's also a good post on Google Developers, which is a little bit briefer. If you want a shorter read, go read that about what the announcements are around Flutter 2. Feedback. Now, I did mention earlier that we'd really like some feedback. So if you haven't asked a question during this event, please take a screenshot of this, go to this URL and complete the survey form. So any question on Twitter, any question that was on the YouTube live feed today, or any feedback survey form that's completed will be eligible for swag. So please use this link and go fill out the very short survey form. And on that note, I guess I'll thank everyone, Andreas, Max, Susie, Brett, for speaking tonight. And we hope you had a good time, learned something new, and I guess we'll see you at the next event. Thanks, everyone. On that note, we might call it a night.